What if the U.S. doesn't raise the debt ceiling when the limit is reached? There's no way that we have to default. We just have to do what families do. And here, I hope, is a very simple explanation. So what's the definition of a default? All the media and the politicians and so on talk about nobody wanting a default. So what is it? Quote, a country is considered in default of payment when it is unable to honor its financial commitments in due time with its creditors, which may be states, they mean other countries, financial institutions such as the International Monetary Fund and the World Bank, or investors in the financial markets. So how much do we actually owe our creditors? The U.S. debt is almost $32 trillion. It's a T, trillion. But more than $6 trillion is actually owed by the U.S. to itself. For example, Social Security is owed over $1 trillion. So the U.S. true debt to creditors is $26 trillion. Even though I do agree that the debt total is $32 trillion, this is what we have to pay our interest on or we go into default, $26 trillion. And the interest on that debt is just about 2%, just a skosh over it. So each year, the cost to service our debts is 2% of $26 trillion. That is $520 billion a year. That means we need about 1/12 of $520 billion each month. That's about $45 billion. I decided to do monthly because that's the way most families think. That's what I do my personal finances with, so that's what I was doing here. So it's $45 billion a month is needed to pay for interest payments on our debt. Just from the regular income taxes that we bring in, the U.S. brings in $2.35 trillion. Monthly, that's roughly $200 billion. Besides the income taxes, the U.S. gets about $1.6 trillion from payroll taxes. Over $1 trillion comes from Social Security payments, then $342 billion from Medicare taxes, and $55 billion from unemployment taxes. Now, these numbers are from a year or so ago, so they can be slightly changed. I'll give the references in the description. And the Federal Reserve provides an income to the U.S. government of $76 billion. That's another surprise. That's about $6 billion each month. But for now, let's just continue with using the $200 billion that comes in from income taxes each month. That's simpler. So, bottom line is, we don't need a default. The U.S. income just from income taxes is about $200 billion a month. Comes in every month. You pay for that on the W-2s. Some people pay it quarterly for their businesses, but the money comes in. The interest payments is only $45 billion. I think that that's way too much. We shouldn't have a big debt, but that's what the interest payments are right now. No way that we need to default for any reason. Now, I use very simple numbers. They're pretty accurate, but there's no reason to default unless the U.S. Treasury Department wants to create one. I mean, if the people pushing the paper want to not pay, they don't want to work together, then if they don't pay, then yes, we're in default. But that's only because human beings have decided to manipulate the situation inappropriately. So the creditors are not a problem, and the U.S. does not officially default, but what about Social Security? How about the people on disability, SSI? What happens there? Well, the amount taken in each month from Social Security payroll taxes is about $1 trillion, which happens to be about the same that the Social Security program pays out each month to all recipients. So there's no problem paying for Social Security. In fact, it doesn't even have to come out of the general fund. The payroll taxes are paid. That's what's used to pay for Social Security. So there shouldn't be any fear-mongering there. How about defense and healthcare costs? Defense needs about $65 billion each month. Remember that the general fund gets about $200 billion each month from income taxes. We only needed $45 billion only to pay for interest. That leaves $155 billion. After paying for defense, we still have $110 billion left each month. All healthcare government costs together, they're the biggest single budget requirement of the government. That includes Medicare, Medicaid, Children's Health Insurance Program, and Affordable Care Act, payroll taxes. That brings in $30 billion a month. But the total cost is $110 billion. which means $80 billion from the general fund would be needed. So we had $110 billion. That leaves $30 billion in the general fund. Also learned that the Federal Reserve pays the U.S. government an amount equal to about $6 billion a month. So the politicians and the administration have about $36 billion. They can obviously do things to delay other expenditures. I would recommend covering the Justice Department, but I'd also recommend not paying the salaries of anybody that's in the upper echelons of the legislative branch or the executive branch. So why do politicians and the media say that there's going to be a default if the ceiling isn't raised on time? Well, I just like using facts, and my answer to that question would be conjecture. Probably correct, but still just be conjecture. Do what families and most businesses do. And interestingly, if the debt ceiling is not raised, the government and politicians just have to do the same thing as if we had a balanced budget amendment to the Constitution. Maybe that is what the Constitution is already really saying.